Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Barry Kostrinsky. These are artist talks that I host every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. Tonight we have Babs Reingold presenting. She's going to discuss her exhibition that's up. If you'd like to see previous talks, you can go to my website and there's a link to the YouTube where you can see Lily White's talk. She spoke last week, and this is actually our 18th talk. It's sort of funny how you can just do things slowly, one at a time, and it builds up. And I like that. I sort of like the accumulation that you get. And in a year, I mean, imagine you can have 50 talks or something like that. So next week we have coming, I'm going to punch this up. We have Linda Troller on the 6th, and then after that, Bonnie Leibowitz. So an exciting program. Our format's about 30 minutes. Everyone feel free to jump in and ask questions whenever they like, make comments, use the chat if you like. We also have Mo Kelly here, fomo@gmail.com. Mo will be modeling, doing, I would say 5 or 10 minute poses. And, part of this idea is, can you listen, be conscious of listening, and draw at the same time? And I think it's a way to sort of challenge us as artists, if you like to draw. Of course, it's enough just to listen, think, and respond as well. I will say when I teach painting, I often let people use 2 brushes when they have to make a very light color. One brush in their strong hand for the white, and so they don't put too much of another color in the other hand to just dot on a little blue, say. And yes, it works, so they don't put too much blue and you get a very light color and you mix on the canvas. But more importantly, it activates both sides of the brain, the left and the right, by using 2 hands. And I think by attempting to draw and listen, you're doing like an exercise, a workout, if you will, for your brain that maybe gets neurons firing, in a larger cloud. So without further ado, and a quick welcome to Lawrence Weedman. Haven't seen you in a while. Nice to see you. Babs, go ahead and welcome. Thank you. You can see some of Babs' presentation behind us, and nice to have you. And beforehand, thank you, Babs. Thank you, Mo. And thank you, everybody, for coming. When we share as a group, we all sort of grow from it. It becomes a community. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you for having me and asking me to do this. And I did prepare more of an overview and then ending with my current show. Is that what you were expecting? Because you sort of said, no, she's going to talk. Well, you just said she's going to talk about her current show. I've got the whole slide presentation that goes through. So
no, my mistake. What I always like to say to artists, and that's just my misunderstanding. Present what you want to spend. Present.
Okay.
This is sort of your time. And, if it's just what you did, if it's what you did when you were young, if you do an overview, I sort of like, as artists, we don't always get the leeway to make decisions. We often do in our art. So it's sort of nice to, present as you wish.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to start, and let me get the screen sharing going while I begin. And I, of course, have, let me see here, if I can remember how to do this. What is it? Under play, it's been a while since I've done one of these. Slideshow. Under play from start.
Yep, that's it.
Okay. And there we go. Okay. So I have been making work for the last 20 years with 3 themes. It's the environment, poverty, and beauty. And as I go through the presentation, you're going to see that I experiment with a lot of different materials, some unique, some ordinary. And I like that mixture, and some discarded materials. I like the decadence of materials as well. The first theme I'm going to start with, and I'm going to go back and forth just a little bit, so that I can build up to how I got to this installation, because this comes a little bit later. But anyway, the first thing that you're seeing in front of you is an environmental piece, and it's called The Last Tree. But let me give you just a little background. And what happened is that in 2005, poverty came to the foreground for me when I watched Hurricane Katrina. And I thought a lot about the impact of this hurricane on this less, the people that were the less fortunate of the population, and how, I mean, this was a huge deal because a lot of people died in this hurricane. And then in 2006, I heard Jared Diamond, who is the anthropologist, who wrote a book called How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed. And something about his talk, I don't know what it was, but the two events struck me, and I started down this path. One was that that I did this from a personal view as well, my own with poverty, but I'll come back to that in a minute. So anyway, that was 2005 and 6, this happened. And then, and here I am, by the way, working on one of the individual stumps. And I included this so that you can see that the stumps are made of silk organza and human hair. They're not wood. People look at that big installation and they think that there's somehow that those are real stumps. I don't know how many times people have told me that that's what they think they are. Anyway, so I decided to do this big installation of 193 stumps, and I worked on it between 2012 and 2013. And the first appearance of this show was at the Issei Cultural Foundation in Soho in New York. And there's 193 stumps, and they symbolize the recognized countries by the UN. So I was trying to make this environmental statement. And what happened when I heard Jared Diamond speak, he made this comment. He's talking about his book, and he made this comment. He said, "What do you think the islander was thinking when he chopped down the last tree?" And he was referring to Easter Island. And he was thinking about the fact that, these people deforested their whole island, not realizing that they were essentially self-destructing. So that remark stayed with me. And it was the first time, too, that I started applying poverty to the environment. And that's how Katrina and this idea of the environment came together. And Jared Diamond, in his book, I then got the book called Collapse: Why Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed. He talks about the 5 factors that contribute to human societal collapse. And I don't need to go into those right at the moment, but basically you get the idea. It's like a lot of these islands that collapse like this, or these civilizations that collapse, is they didn't account for certain things. And the Easter Islanders didn't account for the fact that the trees wouldn't grow back. They wouldn't grow back in time to sustain them. Anyway, then let me see if this works here. This works. There we go. Now, this was the first drawing that I did, but I didn't do this drawing until 2008. And sometimes it takes me a while to conceptualize what I'm going to do. And then here is the second showing. This installation was at the Birchfield Penny in Buffalo, New York. And that's the well-known museum that houses the Charles Birchfield collection. Anyway, and I should tell you that also in this installation, there is a video component. And that video component entails a eerie soundtrack. And it starts out with a person chopping down a lone tree. And all you're seeing is the axe going down on the tree. And you're hearing this constant noise. And then this slow, eerie soundtrack coming in. So this work really, it was big installation. Now, it wasn't the first big installation, and I'll show you that in the following slides. But the poverty series,
I like your use of multiples, and I find your work poetic. And I'm just going to go out there and ask, did you ever do poetry? I mean, I know it's an odd question.
I did.
That's a good one.
But that was so long ago, and I myself, and I have poets that absolutely love my work. I had a best friend, unfortunately she's no longer alive, that at one point wanted to do a collaboration with poetry and my work. We had talked about it. And that was, I'll show you those pieces towards the end. I have a few of those in here that she wanted to try and do something with. And it unfortunately didn't happen. But what made you ask that?
Well, it has, just a visual read. It reads as sort of a poetry. And I have to point out this image here, Lily White, you have to see this. This is not unlike something Lily White presented.
Yeah, yeah. So you're very intuitive, Barry.
Huh, that's interesting. Well, so at any rate, then, so so the next body of work I'm going to talk about. So I'm going back. This is, you see this from 2002. This is what I call my poverty and concealment work. And I think about that, at the time, I didn't realize that the poverty work would grow out of the concealment work, but because it was, the work was initially focused on illuminating an individual hiding within his or herself, and hiding secrets in layers and within layers. But looking back, I realized that this was my own issue with an experience of poverty and the shame of poverty. There's a lot of shame with poverty that people who haven't experienced it don't understand. But anyway, I realized that this skin series was really about concealment. And then that I was trying to do this, these were about this idea of this outer skin sort of covering and hiding and protecting our body. But then what happens when we it starts to get attacked by diseases and those kind of things. And I made these stain paintings totally by putting objects all on top. These were stain baths I developed. This is my own method that I started using rust and tea together. And the discovery of what happened was totally by accident, where I had something that I was staining with tea and a rusted object interacted with it. And I got these incredible blacks that I could not get in any other way. So that's what started me on this path of doing these pieces, that I took notice of this, strange little incident in the studio. And they started looking like topographical landscapes. And then eventually that work came into what I call the double vessel series. And you see, this is newer work. So I've always, all along the way, I do these hither and thither, but they're also part of how I stain all of the bags. The bags are rust and tea stained. This installation is all silk organza, rust and tea stained. And then it's like, and I flip back and forth between paper, and you'll see another piece that has some stained paper in it. But this piece, which was called Le Long Durée, is a long moment, and it's part of the concealment series. And this was the first room size installation I did. And there are lights that go off and on. And you only see portions of this installation at a time. Like when the light goes off, obviously it's not revealed. So I was playing with this idea of just seeing bits of things, and the idea of how we view and see things, that you can never see the whole of anything. And that
that's an interesting point, Babs. I thought about this. We see sort of flat. Like, think of yourself. Maybe you see it in a mirror, or think of someone, you see their front or their back or their side, but you never see 360 degrees at once. It's sort of odd. We don't really see reality. We see from, maybe 180 degrees, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. It's sort of
Yeah.
bizarre.
Well, it was something that fascinated me and why I also went into 3D. Because I have an MFA in painting and I used to paint, I mean, I paint the figure. I taught painting. I taught life drawing. I mean, I went from that kind of work to just being so engaged with the idea of having to walk around something and having that 3D situation. And when I thought about how you can't view something all at once, I guess that's part of this whole thing with the light, and this is another piece that is that way. The lights are on timers. My brother, who's an electrical engineer, built these boxes for me, and they go off and on at timed, different time sequences, and some are on longer, some are on shorter. So you can never get the whole of the installation. It's like you don't see it in the light, you see it in this darkish way. But anyway, it was also why this was called baggage light was also, again, this idea where I'm starting to think about my own baggage, and then all of us, the baggage that we carry. And then the next installation I did, which was called Labyrinth, Current Millennium, this piece was this was 20 feet in diameter. And this is all silk organza, rust and tea stain, and it's filled with human hair. And I've been using the human hair idea as a representation of humanity. And it's in that way in the last tree in the first piece I showed you, which was in 2013. So I've been using it now for a while. I started really using it in 05. And there are video cameras concealed in this installation, and out in the front, it's behind a black curtain, out in the front, people that come in can see the people inside viewing. So there was a sort of this surveillance idea, and there's a secrets audio that plays with this piece. And in this, the secrets were solicited. Now, these were solicited around the time of 2003, 4 on my website anonymously, not a time when people were doing so much digital and so much of this online stuff. And it was amazing the things that people revealed. And so then I got a group of friends and somebody who was a sound artist, and we recorded the secrets and talked in these secretive tones. So this is playing continually while you're viewing this piece. And then the first, my response to Katrina from 2005 was to think about those people being hung out to dry. And this was my first hung out to dry piece. And from hung out to dry grew some other works. And these are rust and tea stained papers. Some is rice papers. I use encaustic as a resist method, and I also use the encaustic as a medium so that, parts will get revealed. The rice paper is fascinating when you burn in encaustic into it. And again, this is all laying paper in trays and working with objects to stain. And then I went to the next hung out to dry, which there's a jump here, but I was doing others, but this is hung out to dry number 3. And this showed at the art lot in Brooklyn for about 6 months. And strangely enough, this work survived a tornado, a hurricane, and multiple snowstorms during the 6-month showing, which was really weird that this occurred during, you're in New York and a hurricane came through, an 80-mile-an-hour hurricane. And of course, then later on we had Sandy, so I guess it wasn't so weird. But the piece was a little worse for wear at the end of the showing. It's like, anyway, next I did another hung out to dry piece, which again, there's all kinds of materials. There's found materials. There's a lot of different fabrics in this piece. And you can see here, and I have the hair is everywhere. And I can talk about how I started to use hair too with simulating skin and things like that. But then this is a really big piece. This is a 40 by 25 foot installation that's viewed from scaffolding. And this was shown at the Moran Arts Center in St. Petersburg, Florida. And this has a lot of components to it as well. There's sound, there's video of these words, a single word sometimes, or phrases that scroll across the wall, and some of it statistics, some of it emotional reactions of what it feels like to live in the projects. And so this is from my own experience of living in the projects in the east side of Cleveland. And here's another view of it. You can see all the clothes on the line, the distorted shapes. Really is about, I guess it's a metaphor for distorted life. I mean, this is horrible existence. And in this piece, I had also heard from a friend who lived near projects that that the projects were getting, the people there were getting pissed at the gentrification. And so they put their boom boxes in trash cans and chained them closed and put them on and ran them all night to sort of run the people out. So I have a boom box in a trash can playing, which you can see back there. And I will tell you, by the end of the show, they always go, especially when I have soundtracks, they go, well, we were getting a little tired of that soundtrack by the end of it, but it's quite a moving piece. And again, this one has a lot of lights in it, and they do that thing where they fade off and on. And the soundtrack was created by a sound artist by the name of Lynn Culbertson, and she was the one who did the Secrets piece as well.
Babs, I do want to mention, Audrey Anastasi points out that it would be nice, and have you ever videoed, when you have the lights going on and off, it becomes a work in time. Have you ever taken a video and considered that either a work in itself, or integrated that, played that back on a TV or something like that while it's in a presentation?
I have not done that. I have video of these installations after the fact, just to show what it's like to be in the installation. And that's an interesting concept, like whether it becomes another element within an installation.
Sort of loops on itself, like
right.
like
Yeah.
chaos theory in a way.
Yeah. Well, when I was doing the surveillance idea, that in a way is part of it too, because you're seeing the lights going off and you're seeing the people walking through. But and I have video of that piece. The old days when I really didn't have like serious equipment, or though I do have good video from a friend of this project, as well as the labyrinth. And of course, later on now we've gotten, so simple to do video on your cameras. On your phones rather. So it's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of it that way, because in the last tree, the video does play while you're there. You're getting this, but it's its own piece. It's not of the installation. That's interesting. All right, so where was I? Anyway, so from the hung out in the projects, I moved into calling the series that happen now, which are Luna Window. The Luna Window comes from it's me. The name of the housing projects that I lived in which was called oh god, it just went out of my brain. Anyway, the housing projects was on what used to be land that used to be Luna Park, which was an amusement park like Coney Island in Cleveland. So I thought about the irony of living in a housing projects that was once an amusement park. And it was just something so bizarre about this idea of like ghosts and people past, and what this land was used for prior to me being there. Now I'm there after it's already been going on as a project years later. But there was just something so strange about that. So again, these pieces, now I call these all Luna window. The Luna comes from Luna Park. It's not what you think. That's not moon window. And then the first ones were just Luna window. And then I started doing a whole bunch of these ladder pieces. And this piece, as you can see, was at the AC Institute in Chelsea in 2013. So now I had the last tree in the spring, and then I had this show in the fall. So 2013 was 2 solo shows in a very busy year. And they're again constructed of, they're all stuffed with human hair. They're all silk and tea stained, and I separate the hair to get the blonde hair for certain pieces. I've had salons collect hair for me from 1998. I started getting them to collect, and I can't remember when I first started using them as soft sculpture. In fact, I think it was already back in the late 90s I was using them, because I had a piece in the Newark Museum where they were stuffed. That's when I first started stuffing them, and I was thinking at that time of them as entrails, which is a strange segue.
Babs, let me ask you a question. Usually I only ask this of certain artists, and I only ask it where I see certain kind of work, and yours is sort of going in that route. And it has to do with your coloration, it has to do with the hair, and it has to do with sort of the overall character. I just put it bluntly, what was the burn in your life?
What was the what?
The burn. The burn.
Burn, B-U-R-N?
Yeah, so I'm asking, was there a very hard experience that you had in your life at some point, an extremely hard one?
Oh, yeah. And not just one. It was pretty traumatic. We were 5 kids. My father got MS when I was 10. And then by the time I was like 14, we ended up living in a projects because there was no money on the east side of Cleveland. And it was just, and my mother had a lot of issues. It was a very, very difficult time. And I was the oldest girl. I had an older brother, only a year and a half, but I essentially took on a lot of responsibility. And I had responsibility for them, both of them, really, my mother and my father, for years to come. And so life was pretty hard. And frankly, that I escaped as well as I did, I think is pretty good. But we all managed to, and I don't know if there was like one specific, except that the work is quite dark. There's no doubt about that. But you're going to see at the end that I get a little less dark. And I don't know what that means either. But because I decided to flip the script of looking at the dark side of the environment and what's happening, and to think about what the beauty is. And there is something that there were artists, for example, like Eva Hess and Anselm Keifer, and they're dark, they're dark, they're also monochromatic, their darkness that has always attracted me. I love the work of Peter Coyne. It's gritty work, and I want that type of feeling. And I want you to be emotionally, taken with the work. And I have a big compassion for animals. And so I started thinking also, this is where I bring animals into the situation, but I was also already starting to do them in the projects, because they're really the ones that suffer too. The animals in poverty get left behind. They're the last on the list. And this piece was shown at, let's had a number of showings. It was shown at the MFA St. Pete in 2017. I had a solo show in Tribeca at a a loft that a friend was starting as a gallery and has since stopped. And so I bring these in, these animals come in and they hear this, this piece, for example, is called a measure, animal number 1. And a measure refers to how Aristotle thought of it, which is that it's kind of like you measure somebody by their deeds and their humanity. And I'd like to give an example of the artist Sue Coe, who did these drawings of pig factories and the horrific conditions for the animals. And some audience member was so ridiculous. And I thought about that from there on. He said, why are you so worried about the animals and you're not worried about children, the thing that happened to children? And besides, he says, I like my pork chops. I mean, it was a bizarre comment to make. You know, when you have somebody who's talking about the horrific conditions in a factory. And to me, how we treat the animals is a measure of our humanity. It's pretty straightforward. So that's what this work is about. And this is cast wax with graphite, silver graphite rubbed in, and then black pigment is in part of it. And then the white you can see on the paws. And then I have another one of this same mother mold that is a cast iron. And this piece was shown at the Creative Pinellas Gallery. And it was quite dramatic because it goes up 192 inches. And those are steel rings that are hanging from rusted chain. And that's a cast iron animal on that pillow. Again, there's the rust and the tea. And yes, I use the same colors all the time. But here I'm using the silk.
Babs, I do want to point out, I was going to mention Keifer before, because, you know, he does integrate poetry into his works as well. And I will say your thing about how do we measure things, Duchamp has that famous piece where, you know, he's playing with what a metric yard it is. And of course, it's a curve. So it's his way of saying, you know, you can measure things differently, not just a straight, whether it's a yard 36 inches or a meter that's 39. And I think you're hitting on that. You sort of, you come with a lot of information when you decide on how you measure. And, you know, the word success, people use that. Of course, we right away measure financially, but there are many other ways. And you mentioned deeds and, you know, how we affect people. And I do want to thank you for opening up. That is a hard question for me to ask. And, you know, sometimes expressing it to a group is a cathartic thing. And it sort of brings you back because I see it playing out in your work, in your coloration. And I think we'll see towards the end. You even said, I'm trying to flip the switch on it. And it is a lot that you came, you know, what you went through as a young girl, having to become the head of your family in a way, and look at you now. You know? And that's something to be really proud of. I saw something recently, you know, and they use the sine curve as an expression of hitting highs. And it's often important that to hit highs, you have to hit lows. There is a symmetry in life in that way. And, you know, it's, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, well, it's like the idea that simple, you have to experience love to be able to also experience hate or to experience the opposite. But yeah, and now, so I started merging, this is where I started merging really the environment and poverty. I've been merging them. You're sort of kind of seeing them come together. And that's why like an animal will appear here. I don't know why I'm using the animal as my symbol for poverty, but I think of it that way because I do think that we mistreat them. So, but this piece is called The Last Tree Squared. So it's an offshoot, it's in the series. And it has a lot of elements to it. And that is a tree drawn with graphite on silk organza that's waving back there. And then there's one that's also on the back wall of a drawing of a tree. And now 2018, I did this piece, which is, these are all stuffed again with human hair, and these are rust and tea stain animals. Here's the animals, and now they're come full force. They're all hanging out in the boat. And
Babs, you're hitting two forms here. You're hitting the famous Giacometti sculpture that almost looks like ribs exposed on a floor. I forget the title. And you're hitting Louis Bourgeois' form as well as a little bit of Kusama, you know, a sort of shade.
Yeah. The boat, the Kusama boat.
Can I jump in also?
Yes,
The Raft of the Medusa.
Yes. Oh my God. I love that painting. I remember when I finally got to see it in for real. But yes, it is. And but it's like my own weird version of it all.
No, so you're not referencing. I say this office. You're not
I know.
referencing. You're drawing from the same river as those artists did, and I think that's a much more powerful analogy as opposed to an offspring of an idea. You're coming right from the source, and you're hitting a parallel form.
Right. Oh yeah. Good point. Yes. Yeah, because when I'm making the work, I don't think of those people, but you know that in the unconscious, it's all there over the years of looking at so much of it. It's interesting. I had a curator, not a curator. Well, I guess you could call her a curator, but art historian who's a Joseph Beuys expert, and her connection immediately was when she saw my work she goes, oh, this reminds me so much of Joseph Beuys. And then I went back and looked at some of his earlier pieces, and I saw the connection. So that's always fascinating. Anyway, so now I'm going to back up a little and go back to 2006 and talk about this series where which I call, now I'm bringing in my beauty, and this was Beauty and Aging series, and recapture and the environment. I'm going to bring them all sort of together. And I'm just going to quickly show you these pieces, and then I'll come to what's exactly going on in the studio now. But these pieces are called Fallout, Beauty Lost and Found, and it's my hair loss, drawings of my hair loss over the year of 2005. And each day I did a daily doodle, and then I did a drawing of it. I didn't necessarily do it on the day. I did this as I collected the stuff, and up to that point, I had been collecting my hair. I've been collecting my hair since 1998. And in 98, I had a thyroid condition that just started me thinking about this, because I was losing these massive amounts of hair. And I thought, this is so crazy. Like, why am I losing all this hair? And later on, like a couple of years later, I found out that I had that issue going on. And so I thought, if I did these beautiful drawings of it, I could recapture my beauty. So I started doing these hair doodles, and then drawings of the hair doodles. And so here you can see the baggies and of the actual doodle, and then my drawing of the doodle. And oddly enough, this work I decided to put this in a show that's going on right now at this Creative Pinellas. I've received a fellowship money from them, and they have an annual show. So I get to choose what I want to put in the show most of the time. Anyway, so I was looking for a way to recapture my beauty, and I thought, well, this might be the way. And then I decided in this piece, which was shown at the Jersey City Museum in the Feminine Mystique show, it was a great show, by the way. This is photos of me as a child, a baby. I was 2 in this image, and this is by my father. My father was a photographer, and he did the same things that I did. He entered competitions and did all this stuff, but he didn't make a living at his photography, though he'd sold some of his to National Geographic. And I used to like to say we had exotic beginnings, and then everything changed. I was born in Caracas, Venezuela. We lived there till I was 5, and then we lived in Barbados. And then my father and my uncle had a falling out. They were in the sewing machine business, and my father then moved us to Dallas, Texas, of all places. And then eventually we made it to Cleveland because no one could figure out what was wrong with him. And that's how they diagnosed the MS. Too much detail, but at any rate,
No, not too
this
much.
is his photograph that he took of me, and I did this faded thing, and that's the actual hair doodles stitched on to this G-clay print that's stitched onto paper, onto canvas.
And by the way, Babs, it's never too much detail. The details are what make sort of put the flesh on the skeleton. And
Yeah.
I think, so many things you've shared, it opens up work. It's sometimes it's hard to look at a work of art and to, I don't like to read wall type, but if I had the artist there, I know I can get a lot more out of it. You're doing just that for us. So thank you for sharing all of those details.
Well, I'm glad you want to hear them. Thank you. Because I myself like to hear that stuff too. It fascinates me. Like, what somebody's life, what they went through, how they get to where they are, why they're doing what they're doing. That's all the fun stuff. It's like, how'd they get there? So anyway, this work you can see that I do love to draw. So that's part of it. And I love to make objects. So between them, this is where I finally get to now this hairnest series.
And I've got to ask you, Babs, I've seen your drawings. Where'd you get your technical skill from? You're quite a good drawer. Where'd you go to school, or how'd you jump into it?
Well, I was making things, and as a kid, I was always the one making stuff. And I remember we were already struggling in Cleveland, and I decided I would do things like I put together all these sheets of paper and made these drawings and put them up on the windows for the holidays, or I would do that. Now, luckily enough, it's an interesting question. By the way, I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art. I had my BFA from there. I had my MFA from SUNY Buffalo, and I have my MFA in painting, and I was a figurative painter. So, but my early years, again, a lot of information. We were living in the projects. We were the only white Jewish family living in the projects. But I went for a week to a high school, all black high school. My sister went for like 2 months to an all black junior high. And I don't think I would have lasted much longer. And frankly, then I was bused to a all Polish Catholic high school, where all I heard was anti-Semitic remarks, oddly enough, and anti-Semitism. And then there was one other Jew in the high school, and the Jew was the art teacher. And he went to the Cleveland Institute of Art. So this was an interesting situation where you had a teacher that really did influence a person's life. He really encouraged me. I ended up getting gold keys. So I started winning awards in high school. And that's how I got then I eventually got a portfolio together, and I submitted to the Cleveland Institute of Art, and I got in. So I've been drawing as long as I can remember. And I love to draw.
You said a lot in there. One thing that stands out is that you sort of, during the holidays, you sort of decorated the windows where you lived with your art. And so you had to beautify the space.
Yes.
And I think that's what you're still doing.
Yes. In fact, yes. And the weird thing is that I still remember I've always loved to draw trees. And it was weird when I came back around to drawing trees. I go, oh my God, I'm drawing trees again. Because I remember like the lone tree that was existing in that project. I used to look out my window and draw that dang tree. I was always drawing trees. And here I am again, drawing trees.
No, I
It's so
think, what I've learned from all the artist talk I do, I often ask, I didn't have to today, what did you do when you were a young artist? And sometimes it makes artists realize they actually are doing now what they did when they were younger. And I think there's either a
Yeah.
critical experience, and you said it, you looked out your window and you saw the tree. And other times it's, I had an artist say, I didn't realize it. When I was younger, I built little architectural models, and she was still 35 years later working in architectural based work, and she didn't put it together. I think we do that. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, I could even take it back to the whole thing with the sewing. Wait till we talk about that, because I learned to sew in home ec, and here we go again. I literally sewed my clothes because there was no budget for clothes. So I sewed my clothes, and I remember, especially when I was younger, they would comment on the fact that I had 2 skirts and 2 shirts, and cruel kids would make comments about that I would switch them off. You're going to school. I mean, kids are cruel, right? So anyway, I started, it was like when I started really sewing and making the fabric pieces, like the ladders and the stuff thing. And I think, oh my God, I'm sewing. Now it gets even better. My father was a sewing machine mechanic on industrial sewing machines for the Schmata business, and in Caracas, Venezuela, and then in Dallas, Texas. But it's just so weird to, and I learned to sew in school. My mother didn't sew. She did finally get a sewing machine, but it's just weird. So anyway, let me talk a little bit about these pieces. So this is the work I'm in the midst of. I want to eventually do 10 of them. I have 4 of them complete, and they're called hair nests, and you can see the dates, so it's fairly current. And this was the first one in the series, and then I kept changing it, so that's why to 2020. But that's a nest from my hair of a year. And that's where the number comes from in the title. It's that year of hair loss. And then there's these big drawings that I do on panels, which you can't get to see the surface of the panels, but I spend a lot of time making the panel, which is coated with many layers of gesso and then coated with modeling paste and sanded till it's this incredible velvety, but also fresco-like surface to draw on. And it's absolutely wonderful to draw on. And it totally came by, I had been working with modeling paste and other paintings. I mean, I have this whole other body of work. Talking about trees too. I was doing trees and monotypes and all of that stuff, but that I had done these experimentations with modeling paste and rubbing oils into the modeling paste, and sometimes also dragging pigment through the modeling paste. But this is how I got to be working with it. And I've sanded it before. And these are all hand sewn, a lot of hand sewing. I put these in so you can get a sense of them. And the branches are made from different materials in these pieces. And this is hair nest 15, because that's the hair loss from 2015. And I got this idea of tying myself somehow to this incredible thing that we need to sustain life. We need a tree. We can't live without trees. And it's becoming more and more evident. They're finding all kinds of ties that I heard somewhere about, the dendrites in trees are very much related to the same kind of dendrites in the human body. We can't live without these things. We need them. And so it's like, it's just so crazy to think about how, they're all around us and we just don't think about them. Anyway, so this,
you can't help but notice in that last image of the trees, and in this one that's up, how it looks like the knots look like breasts on a
there you go. Yep. They are. And that's another thing I think a lot about, how anthropomorphic trees are. And I used to think about that when I drew them when I was young, how they feel like bodies that are stretching up. And there's something so magnificent about them. And they are. I mean, this one definitely looks like, breasts to me. And I thought about that when I was drawing it. And now this one has cast glass It's actually cast lead crystal, which I had someone do for me, and it cost me a lot of money to have done. But I wanted this idea of fragility to also be associated with the trees. You know, sometimes we think of trees that they're very strong and sturdy, and they do withstand a lot. But then obviously when we're killing them, they're fragile, and humans will destroy. So I wanted some of this, a bit of it broken down there, and it's on a bed of fiberglass, and that is called hair Nesto 1 because it's the hair loss from 2001. And along the way, it's been fascinating to see the differences. Like I want to do 10 years total, and not necessarily in a row, but the coloration of my hair from 2000 to then 15, 16, and now I would be doing the next ones a little later. So I'm still collecting my hair. This goes on. I can't seem to stop. It's perpetual, and then I come up with different ways to present it. I haven't even shown you some of the others. There's other things I've done. I have hair doodles in petri dishes on a bed of wax. That's a piece too, but too much for tonight. And I'm already going way long. But here's a detail of this piece, and this is the last one that I did, and then I jumped on to for 2022 I worked on the next piece that's coming up, and those are cast wax branches along with a termite riddled stump, a branch with silver leaf, an old drawer, and those are embedded in a fiberglass in that drawer. And I just stuck myself in here so you get a sense of the size of the pieces. You can see what they look like with a person there. And that piece, by the way, in the middle that's a lava boulder on top of glass rocks, pond stones, and things. I'm trying to think of what else is in there, and fiberglass is in that too. So I wanted different.
Let me ask you, what do the nests mean to you? Because I have a read on it, but before I say it, I just want to hear your thoughts about the nest that you make from your hair.
Well, first I wanted to insert myself into the piece, which is part of all the hair things, literally, metaphorically and literally. And the nest for me is about birth and regeneration and life. And so I wanted you to think about the nurturing and how we need the trees to live. And that's how I tied the two together. And it's always weird how the ideas come to you, but it was like I've had people give me nests. I've been getting nests from people for years, and I've always loved them. And I thought, oh my God, I could take my hair and make one of my own. And it suddenly dawned on me it would be perfect with these drawings of these trees. And I'm putting myself as if and I did a whole series of work of flying and falling. And I've always loved the idea of birds and just that they can flit away. So the nest became just a nice symbol. And it's like, again, somebody buys this piece, they literally have a piece of me. They have the piece done by me, but they have also a piece of my DNA. And when I started working, especially with the last tree, I thought a lot about humanity, and that sea of hair in buckets, because it's surrounded by hair. So it's stuffed with hair and it's surrounded by hair, is a sea of humanity. And it's literally the DNA, because if it's containing the follicles or whatever, it's dead, but it's also life. It has that thing.
I was thinking those things that you said, but I was also going for a personal read, and sometimes I just, ideas aren't always right. That it could explain that your art is a rebirthing of yourself. It's a way you're trying to evolve. I know you're making social commentary, but this work, as the way you've described it, which of course is the truth behind the work, is very personal work to you.
Yeah. Well, the personal is universal. The personal is, you know, it represents different things for different people, but we all relate to the personal because we have our own personal. It's just that's the way I've always thought of personal as being universal. Same thing with social commentary. It's also personal, but it's universal. It's that's a good point, Barry. That's a really good point. And you know what so this is the next piece. You've seen it behind me when I'm talking because I try to stick up the latest thing I'm working on. And this installation took a lot of work. I basically worked all of 2022 on this. And this is just, I'm showing you the study because I always work with studies. I didn't show you a lot of the drawings, but I'm going to show you. Oh, where the heck are those, the last, I think I'm missing a couple of things here. I sure am. All right, let me see what happened here. Did I open the wrong one? I don't know.
This is
Anyway.
working, given our time constraint, having 6 more slides totally works.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna go through these and you're getting a sense of this show called The Lost Trees. And then I have this as the drawing and let's see here. Okay, and then this is 4 foot square. So I always end up putting drawings in. And these are 3 very small drawings that are called felled tree number 3. And then this is the last slide, which is simply when I first started thinking of this project and I wanted to I do these small, but then I knew I wanted to do some big drawings of it. And I'll eventually do more drawings of these 3 views. I'm planning on doing 4 foot squares of the other 2 views. The center view I've done. And anyway, that's it. And I do have, if you want to see just a quick slice of, let's see, how do I stop sharing? And then I want a new share.
So yeah, just exit the share. If you want, I can do it for you. I could stop the share and then you could punch up the other images.
Okay, it's simply let me open up the video.
I will say, Babs, you can see the color change in the last work, the one that's behind you. You've gone more white. I would say you're in a better place emotionally.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's sort of interesting. I am. So let me get up. Okay, I gotta get out of this thing. I gotta quit my PowerPoint thing and let me get up my video here for a second. And I'm just going to show you a quick video. And
That's fine. I do want to, Babs, while you're doing that, I'm going to read Lily White said, Babs, your work reminds me of fairy tales for some reason.
Oh,
that's an interesting read. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lily also said she loves the long moment. Lily, do you want to expand on that? That's from an earlier image, yes? I may have lost.
Yeah, well, not really. I liked your whole presentation, Babs, and I enjoyed all of the work, really.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you know this. I don't know if I should say this, but I know when they had that big oil spill down in Louisiana.
Yeah.
One way they cleaned it up was by using, you know that then. Okay.
Yeah, I do. Well, tell everybody. Go ahead.
They would get like stocking, pantyhose kind of material, and they'd stuff it with hair.
Yeah.
And they drag that through the water, and somehow it grabs onto the oil. And
well, the hair soaks up the oil. Absolutely. And they had salons collecting hair to send out to, that was like a big drive that they were doing for a while, but then they found more efficient materials. But yes, they literally were using human hair for this. They also make human hair mats that suck up oil, and then they can grow mushrooms on the mats, which is really kind of interesting too. And yes, I mentioned in the beginning, I wanted to flip the script. I'm going to share this for just a second here and play just a little of this here, which is so that you can get a sense of the installation in space. rather than just, and there's no talking in the video, but it's just music. But you can float around the room. Oh, I should mention that the bricks are all, I forgot to talk about them. They're all recycled, shredded paper that is made from my old tax papers and junk mail. And I soaked the paper and made cast bricks out of the path. And then the columns are all hand sewn, different yarns. And that's a story in of itself. I know a friend who's in that business, and I got skeins of all these different yarns. And then I wrapped the trees trying to save them. And so now you can get a sense of the piece. And in here you can really, I figured this is easier than showing you a bunch of details. It's like you're walking through the piece. And the applique circular things that you're seeing, those are, let me stop the sharing. And let's see here, stop sharing, stop share, there it is. Those columns and the applique pieces are actual tree rubbings from the neighborhood of cut limbs that I consider like the wounds, when they chop. And so some of them are bigger. And you notice when I was drawing the hair nest pieces, the big drawings, the wound of that one big tree, the really biggish tree, that wound is now completely different. Because I go by this every day, we walk the dog, and I see the same trees. And I went around and did a whole bunch of rubbings, and the rubbings are on cotton organza with graphite, and those are hand appliqued onto the columns. So there you have it.
Thank you, Babs.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, wow. Can we just say wow, Babs? Your attention to detail on so many levels, beyond just the visual impression that we get from looking at things. It's just really, really appreciated, sharing on this deep level that you did, because we can just understand and truly appreciate all of what goes into what you do. And wow, as I'm going to say, because
Thank you, Wendy.
it's pretty incredible.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, it's really something. Thank you for sharing. And Barry, I'm just going to say, the man asks such great questions. He really gets us to see ourselves in a deeper way, and think about things that we didn't even think about, about our own work. So you're a good man for this job, Barry, what you do.
He is,
I'm glad you
he's
came back to
insightful.
start
Yes.
these talks again, because really, very insightful, very intuitive, it's very meaningful. So on this Thanksgiving week, let's just be thankful and grateful for all of this that we get to share, and be our best selves.
And thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you, Barry, for asking me. I'm always pleased to share with other artists. It's great to hear. It's so great to hear your thoughts and insights too. And you always, I like this because it also gives you something to think about. It's like having a studio visit, and you get to hear what somebody else might do or think. It's great. Works
Yeah, and I think part of the point is we all benefit from this in our own sort of ways. Whether as artists, we see our work in one way usually. And as deep and rich as that can be, it's never the full story. And so when you get an outside view in, it sort of gets you outside of yourself and you can see it another way. Other people don't have the barriers we have to ourselves, and they can pierce through to deep layers. And as well, you know, I could think of artists here. I could see Peg Riley looking, and she's taking in things because I know her work and I know how what she can get from you. And I know how Lily White can get. So, you know, it definitely is a beehive in the best way. We are all benefiting. And I'll tell you, you know, after I do one of these talks and then I go to my, you know, phony and I look at Crackbook and I read the little conversations, I realize how shallow Instagram and Facebook and that chatter is. And I'm talking when I read from top figures in the art world. And I think we're hitting some deep and rich notes in our group. That is really what art is about, what communicating is about, what sharing, and it's got the best of everything. And, you know, sometimes you need a format like this, as opposed to a talk at an art fair where the people are on pedestals and everyone's quiet, waiting to go up and shake the hand of the speaker who then gives them the solo show at Serpentine Gallery. We all know that, and, you know, that's okay, but this is somehow a lot more palatable and real. And so I thank all of you. I have to thank, of course, Mo for being our model. Mo. If anybody would like to contribute to Mo, you can reach out to her or me. I'll send the link. You know, happy Thanksgiving and coming up holidays to everybody. Next week, we have Linda Troller speaking. And then after that, we have, wait, I know this. I'll look it up. I'll make it easy. We have Bonnie Leibowitz presenting. And I will say there are similarities to your work and Bonnie's work, Babs. As I said,
I know her. Yeah, I know her. Yeah.
And I want to say it's all chance. And the fact that you showed an image that really related to Lily White's work from last week, those are what I call good synchronicities. And as well, I can't help but say this. You mentioned Luna Park. I was dog sitting at someone's house sitting. And sure enough, their names, I won't give you their names, but for their access code to their Wi-Fi, it was Luna Park. And so to me, that means things are right. It doesn't make any sense, and that's good. But synchronicities are when the groove,
How wild.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, that is really wild.
It is.
Oh
and
my God. And I have to go back and look at Lily White's presentation. I'm so sorry I've missed a couple. I've had a few things going on. It's been crazy.
We're all busy. I got to mention one other point. Babs has a show up, and she mentioned earlier she's doing the work to get people there. I have a show up. I'm doing that work. I got news for you. It's not our favorite work as artists. It is somewhat drudgery. It's sort of like putting on a show. Is anyone going to come? There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of loneliness. It's sort of part of what we take on. And, you know, as we said, and it was mentioned earlier, sometimes you got to have, you know, Aaron Olshan's mother died and he loved her very much. I don't know if you know Aaron, and he's in great pain. But I try and express he's in great pain because he had great love. And those things sort of go hand in hand. They're two sides of the coin. And so likewise, it may be in our work, that sort of pain, that sort of hard work that we do for the opening and to get people there and to find the collector. It is very, very hard. And on the other side of that is when you make a beautiful piece, when you do your drawings, when you work with the incredible materials you put together, like they're nothing, the way you talk about them. You know, you've developed your expertise. Thank you, everybody. Join us next week if you like. And keep in mind, all these talks are on YouTube. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very